All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. My name is Catherine Teichen, and I am the Conservation Minnesota Board of Directors President. I moved to Minnesota almost 20 years ago, and while I have many more places to visit, I love the variety of our landscapes. From Blue Mountain State Park to the North Shore, we have many places to appreciate and to take care of. For those of you who may not be familiar with Conservation Minnesota, we're a nonprofit organization whose mission is to protect the Minnesota you love by solving some of our state's most important environmental problems. We are committed to protecting people and places from the adverse impacts of pollution and climate change, while ensuring that everyone who calls Minnesota home has access to the great outdoors and opportunities to enjoy it. Our work is centered around bringing people together across regions, backgrounds, and beliefs to find real solutions. I joined the board of directors in 2018 because I had seen the time and the hard work that our staff spent bringing folks from different viewpoints together and hosting conversations like these. So tonight, we'll be talking with three amazing women leading some of our most important state agencies. These agencies are partly responsible for implementing historic investments from the last two legislative sessions. So we will learn more about how they are working to address climate pollution, increase renewable energy, and protect our great outdoors. Now, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our moderator for the evening. We have Nels Paulson, the Policy Director with Conservation Minnesota. Nels works to keep our members informed about what's happening at the state capitol, and he helps keep elected officials informed about what we're hearing from our members. Nels's favorite outdoor spot in Minnesota is Saganaga Lake, found in the northern portion of the Boundary Water Canoe Area Wilderness. I told Nels that I probably was going to mispronounce that, so congratulations, everybody. But Nels, tell us more about who we have here with us tonight, and please correct my pronunciation.
Oh, I definitely don't want to do that, Catherine, but thank you. That way, if I don't correct it, then it'll be harder to look up on the map. But thanks to the commissioners and everyone for watching and joining us tonight. And thanks to my colleagues, Avery and Laura, who put in a lot of time setting this up. If we go alphabetical, I'll introduce Commissioner Grace Arnold first. Commissioner Arnold was appointed to lead the Minnesota Commerce Department in 2020. The Commerce Department has a broad array of regulatory oversight. And I think about Commissioner Arnold every time I fill up my vehicle at a gas station and I see the weights and measures sticker verifying the accuracy of the gas pump. And that's got to be a lot of work for you, Commissioner, to check each and every pump and put those stickers on. So congrats. I'm just kidding. We can put all of the broad commerce duties aside tonight, except for one area, the area of clean energy. The Commerce Department's Division of Energy Resources focuses on equitable energy policy, regulation, and program design and implementation. And this area of work has become very busy, both from policies crafted at the Capitol in St. Paul and from federal clean energy policies influencing this sector. Welcome, Commissioner Arnold, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Next in alphabetical order is the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's Commissioner, Katrina Kessler. Commissioner Kessler was appointed to her current role in 2021. And before that, she served as an assistant commissioner for water policy and agriculture after returning from a stint with the city of Minneapolis as the director of the Surface Water and Sewers Division. And Commissioner Kessler, one of my favorite titles of a job you previously held was when you served as Effluent Limit Supervisor at the MPCA. And I have to think that your work with effluent has prepared you well for some of the shenanigans at the state capitol in St. Paul. So welcome, Commissioner Kessler.
Thanks, Nels.
And finally, in alphabetical order is Commissioner Sarah Strommen, who leads the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. I think Commissioner Strommen oversees the largest number of staff of the agencies we're discussing tonight. And before being appointed commissioner of the DNR in 2019, Commissioner Strommen served as an assistant commissioner at the DNR. And before that, she served as an assistant director at the Board of Water and Soil Resources. And one of my favorite fun facts about Commissioner Strommen is that she previously held elected office in the city of Ramsey, Minnesota, where she was elected to the city council and as mayor of that community. And Commissioner Strommen, whether it was you or your predecessors or the city staff, I always thought the city of Ramsey did a great job managing the parking around the annual game fair event. So thank you for your work if you were part of that. And if you weren't, thanks to your former colleagues. And I have to think that maybe that experience has helped you manage a busy parking lot like at Split Rock Lighthouse on a holiday weekend, for example. So welcome, Commissioner Strommen.
Thank you, Nels. Thanks to Conservation Minnesota.
I'm planning to jump around and ask questions tonight of each of the commissioners on the successful policies and statutes passed during the 2023-2024 biennium. But to kick things off, I'm told that it's in vogue to do a little icebreaker. So I thought we'd ask each of the commissioners if they would tell us about one of your favorite outdoor places in Minnesota. And Commissioner Arnold, why don't you go first?
Sure. Well, I am going to pick the Cuyuna area. My family, they're big mountain bikers, so they mostly go off and mountain bike, and I worry about them falling. And then I kayak or paddle or hike or do something like that. So I'll go with Cuyuna.
That's great. Commissioner Kessler, do you have a favorite outdoor place?
Well, I have many, but my favorite pastime these days is open water swimming. And so I try to find places where I can have open water swimming adventures. And in the last month, this morning I swam in Lake Harriet, but in the last month, I think I've swam in 4 or 5 lakes in Minnesota, including Leech Lake by where Commissioner Strommen has a place, and Mille Lacs, and others along the North Shore, which are cold, have been cold, but I appreciate that opportunity across the state.
Does that mean you'll be watching the Olympics and the swimming events with an extra eye?
Yeah. My family is going to Paris. Like, we're all in. So that's our big summer adventure.
Very
Not
cool.
to swim, but to spectate.
And Commissioner Strommen, do you have a favorite outdoor place?
Well, I always have difficulty with this question because as the DNR commissioner, it's like being asked, you have a favorite among your children, right? We have so many amazing places across Minnesota that we manage. And often my new favorite place is the last place I visited. But as Commissioner Kessler just revealed, my family has a place on Leech Lake. And so that is a spot that is very near and dear to my heart. We spend as much time as we can up there, and it truly is an amazing place on the water and in the surrounding areas.
And has the fishing been any good this year?
The fishing has been all right, yes. Not revealing any spots though,
That's
so
right.
don't ask.
All right. Well, we have quite a few accomplishments that we want to cover, and I'll just jump right in. Commissioner Kessler, I think the 2023-2024 biennium was one of the busiest bienniums for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And one of the things that we were really proud of was the banning of PFAS in 11 different product categories. Conservation Minnesota supported that bill or bills like it for many years. And this feels like one of the top accomplishments within your agency, at least in our opinion. What are your thoughts on this accomplishment and its impact in Minnesota? And I'm curious if you've heard from industry or other states about the PFAS ban.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. And first of all, huge shout out to Conservation Minnesota, not only for hosting us this evening, but for the pivotal role that they played in many of the things we'll talk about tonight, but most prominently at this moment, the new law phasing out non-essential uses of PFAS. These are the forever chemicals. This is a major win for Minnesotans, I would say, for the nation and the world, as well, specifically for the environment and for our health. And when I think about all of the different areas of work in Minnesota, PFAS touches all of us. And this is highlighted through conversations that Conservation Minnesota has helped lead, and the breadth of the work that's happening across state government and at the local level. And Nels, to get to your question, we've heard from many people about this, and many people who are grateful. And I think we have good partners in the legislature. We continue to have interest not only from the folks in the environment committees, but in other committees, because this touches the work of not just the environment, but the human health and the products industries, as well as liability and the way that things move through commerce. And unfortunately, when it comes to PFAS, we're seeing this in every element of work of the MPCA. So it's in our landfill leachate, it's in composting facilities, it's in wastewater, it's coming out of emissions out of facilities. And we even have a proposal in front of the Legislative Commission, the LCCMR, to examine PFAS in pine needles. And the breadth of this continues to unfold. So we are grateful that we were able to partner with legislators and leaders like yourselves to advance work that was called for when we put together the Minnesota PFAS Blueprint in 2021. And that really gave the launching pad for the work around the PFAS ban. And we're especially grateful for the advocacy of the Amara Strand family. This law has been named after Amara, and it really truly will help turn off the tap, so to speak, when it comes to protecting our human health and the environment. And I mentioned that we have heard from industry, but I think at this moment, I like to highlight that this is truly an opportunity for Minnesota and for Minnesotans, because as the birthplace of 3M and many of these chemicals, we also have a responsibility and an opportunity to think about this to catalyze additional innovation and invention and really power the next several generations of our economy and of our way of life. And I'm hopeful that when we talk to people who see themselves in this work, that they see this as an opportunity. And the way that this ban will play out, ultimately manufacturers will have the opportunity to make their case to the MPCA as to whether or not their use could be considered unavoidable. And we're going through rulemaking to establish how that will work. But it really has to be a very, very narrow criteria. It has to be essential for health, safety, or functioning of society. And we are hearing from other states who are looking to Minnesota as leaders in this moment. The only other state to pass a law like this is Maine. Although I hear from colleagues across the country who are very interested in this and see similar bills moving. And I just want to call out that unlike Maine, who received the Maine Department of Environmental Protection was asked to implement a ban, but they didn't get the adequate funding or the support to do it. I am very grateful to be in this space with all of you, because in Minnesota, we have the infrastructure and the resources that came with it to make this really successful. And that is why I truly think this is not just a win for our state, but for people across the country and across the world.
Thanks, Commissioner. And resources definitely matter. And Commissioner Strommen, when I think about the resources that went to the DNR in the 23-24 biennium, it had to have been one of the most significant bienniums ever, or in a long time, for the DNR. Where and when can Minnesotans expect to see some of these investments in state parks and forests and boat launches and other state managed natural areas?
Yeah, well, the good news is people can already start seeing these investments being made. But what you're talking about is our Get Out More modernized outdoor recreation experiences, which was a historic and transformational amount of funding at $150 million of investments to help ensure that Minnesotans of all abilities can experience a world-class recreation system, whatever outdoor experience they choose. And so those investments fall into 5 categories. The first is enhancing access and welcoming new users to public lands. And there we're investing $35.4 million, and that will be spread across about 100 projects. The second category is modernized camping and related infrastructure. And we're going to be spending about $9.5 million to modernize the campground at Minneopa State Park and to upgrade the wastewater system at Myrie Big Island State Park, which I know Commissioner Kessler will appreciate. The third category are investments to enhance fisheries and fishing infrastructure. And this is a $60 million investment It's going to completely overhaul 2 of our fish hatcheries, the Waterville Fish Hatchery, which is a major producer of walleye, northern, and muskie, and then Crystal Springs Hatchery, which is one of our cold water trout hatcheries. We'll be making smaller investments in a number of our other hatcheries across the system, as well as some investments in shore fishing opportunities, recognizing that for a lot of Minnesotans who don't have boats, shore fishing is a great way to be able to experience angling. We do have a large $30 million investment in modernizing boat access, and that will be both for motorized watercraft as well as paddle watercraft. And we'll be spending about $30 million on 40 to 60 large scale projects. So those will be completely rehabilitating public water accesses to enhance the stormwater best practices, to better enable anglers and boaters who are coming off the water to clean, drain, dry, dispose of bait, those things that prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. And then there will be the remainder of the funding of another $5 million for 75 to 125 small scale projects. And then the last category is $10 million to restore streams and modernize water related infrastructure. We're going to be doing about 10 dam removal and modification projects and 5 culvert replacements. And these projects that are already identified are going to reconnect an estimated 156 miles of streams. So that's a significant ecological impact. They'll enhance fish passage and support waterfowl production. As I mentioned, Minnesotans will be able to see this construction unfolding right now. Construction is already in progress on for an accessibility improvement at William O'Brien. Those are very massive accessibility improvements to improve campsites and accessible canoe and kayak launch, trail upgrades, and new restrooms and shower facilities. We're also have construction underway at the Lakeview Campground at Sibley State Park. We have 6 fishing piers that are slated to be replaced this fall, and 10 shore fishing sites that are high priority sites for 2024 and 25. We have a number of those public water access sites that are in RFP or construction process. So Sturgeon Lake, Sugar Lake, German Lake, Madison Lake, and Mankato. And the cool thing is you can go on to the DNR's website and you can actually see a map of all of the public water accesses that are slated to receive investments. And then we also will be starting road improvements on some of our forest roads that access popular recreation sites. So Cloquet Valley and Richard J. Dorr forests are receiving some enhancements on forest roads. And then a little bit different flavor from the actual infrastructure. We are expanding our all-terrain track chair program at state parks. That has been an incredibly popular park. We have these chairs available at 13 state parks now. We're going to extend that to an additional 9 state parks. And those track chairs are completely free to use and really enable visitors to access trails that a regular wheelchair would not be able to go. So great way for people with mobility disabilities to access, but also friends and family to enjoy those experiences with them. So again, encourage folks to check out our DNR website and go, you can search out the Get Out More page on that site, and all of the projects are detailed there, and we will have construction updates as they happen.
Thanks, Commissioner. That's a lot. That's great. And if we're going to pivot from big financial investments to big policy investments, Commissioner Arnold, the last biennium saw quite a few changes in the goals and responsibilities of the department regarding clean energy. And it's at least my opinion that the 100% carbon-free energy by 2040 standard was probably the biggest accomplishment of the 2023 legislative session. Where are you in the process of rolling out the 100% clean energy plan, and what can Minnesotans expect over the next 16 years as the law is implemented?
Thanks. Yeah, this is a really big deal for clean energy development in the state. So unlike some of the other programs that Commissioner Strommen talked about, we don't get this sort of tangible, like, the department has a thing that we are building. We have a lot of regulatory work to do to make that happen. So now utilities are submitting plans that kind of on a rolling basis look ahead. We have gotten some additional resources to be able to help analyze those. The analysis is not just as simple as like, do you have a new plant and do you need to upgrade the plant and how much is that going to cost? We're now getting into, you know, a little bit more complicated of an energy system, and we're evaluating different trade-offs than we were before. So whereas before it was about kind of need and cost, we're now thinking, is this the right technology? Is this the right technology for the money? We're doing a lot of those kind of analysis. So it's really exciting to be at that point. I think there are a number of really promising technologies, and our utilities kind of each have different plans and goals to get to the, you know, paths to get to 2040, and we'll be evaluating those as we go. On the other side of we sort of have two halves of our energy division. We were doing a lot to make sure that we're maximizing federal money and that we have programs that are supportive of all of the clean energy build out. So we have solar on schools, we have community solar, we have a solar for all program, and that's, you know, just to name a few. So we're working a little bit on the programmatic side, but when you think about getting to 2040, it's much more on the regulatory side and supporting that transition at the Public Utilities Commission.
Thanks, Commissioner. And I'm going to stick with you for one more follow-up question. The permitting reform bill that was passed during the 2024 session was a big bill, and we weren't sure if it was going to make it until the very end. I'm curious how that bill is going to help reach the 100% clean energy goal, and what sort of changes can we expect to see on the path forward?
Sure. So the estimates are that it's going to knock off about 18 months of the current 7 years of timeline to build out a particular project. So that's an average. Every project is a little bit different. What it does is it eliminates some of the certificate of need. So before you had to prove that you needed a thing, it's taking some of the smaller projects and saying, yes, we're going to need all of these because we need to build out this massive transmission and generation system. It's not saying that everyone needs to pass out of regulatory processes. In a lot of cases, even if it's clear that we need, you know, a solar array or something, those alternatives also need to be evaluated to make sure that they're the right for the transmission system and that they are, you know, the cheapest thing that we can do, or, you know, there are a lot of other factors. So, you know, this is not getting out of regulatory processes that protect the environment or that, you know, make sure that we're doing this transition as effectively and affordably as possible. But it does make sure that when there are some of the smaller pieces of the system that we just know are needed, then we, you know, sort of get rid of red tape there. It is also it streamlines the process quite a bit. And in the previous process, there was back and forth between our department and the Public Utilities Commission that just, you know, wasn't adding any value. It was sort of process for process sake. So got rid of a lot of those things. It's also shortening the right of first refusal timeline. This one's actually a big deal. So that's the time where a utility has the right to to build a transmission line that's been approved for construction by our regional grid operator. They almost never, they almost always say that they would like to buy it, or that they would like to build it. So we just shorten the timeline that they have to do it so that there's more time, so that it reduces the time of construction. The other thing that's going to happen is we have an environmental review unit that sits within the department that's going to move over to the Public Utilities Commission that will align the work to be much more similar to other regulatory processes in the state. And then we will have grow our regulatory analysis division to be able to, instead of now we do environmental review and then provide that information to the Public Utilities Commission, now we'll be able to advocate to say, you know, based on all the information and, you know, the way the grid works and where we're building clean energy, this is probably the best route for this particular transmission line, as an example. So that'll be a new responsibility that we take on that will help us to be effectively advocating for the smooth and affordable and effective transition to 2040.
Thank you. Commissioner Kessler, another significant policy from the last legislative session was the cumulative cumulative impacts law. And I know there's a multi-year rulemaking process, which is kind of already underway. But how do you envision this policy being implemented several years from now? And how will it help prevent air pollution in Minnesota communities?
Yeah, so for people who don't know what that means, the cumulative impacts law that was passed along with a lot of the other historic things we're talking about in the 2023 session essentially tells the MPCA that when we look at permits, and this is a specific subset of permits, so it's air permits for facilities of a certain size that are located in environmental justice areas, so areas that we know because we have data that are already overburdened by too much pollution. When the agency is asked to make a decision about a permit for this type of air facility, we can't just look at that facility in isolation. We need to look cumulatively at the burden that that community and that facility's potential neighbors are already feeling, and consider all of the cumulative impacts as part of our decision-making process. And so that is a authority that was given to the agency, and it is we are one of only a couple states in the nation who have this as part of our regulatory process now. The rulemaking to define that process is underway, and rulemaking within the state process is very methodical and inclusive and defined through administrative law. So we are working diligently to move along that process and to hear as many voices as possible. So we were given a deadline by the legislature of 3 years to complete that process. And that is a relatively fast process or fast timeline for that type of complex rule that really is nation leading. And it is hard work. And part of the reason it is hard work is because we can't look to somebody else who is already doing this. And in order for us to be successful, it can't be just the MPCA ideas that will carry forward. This takes many voices, and it takes energy and patience and building trust among parties who may not be used to sitting at the table together. So part of this is making sure that we're hearing community voices early in our regulatory process. And another part of this is making sure that the proposer of a project or the proponent of a facility knows what they need to do and how they need to do it. And that includes how they will communicate and work with their neighbors, and that we need to make well-informed decisions based on data. And so as the cumulative impacts process plays out, one of the critical steps is that if a project triggers a cumulative impacts analysis, and if our analysis shows that a proposed facility would add additional burden to this cumulative burden that they already experience, that the only way a project could move forward is if that proposer were to come through with something called a community benefit agreement, which would be an agreement by which they would give additional benefit and value to their neighbors. So this law will prevent additional air pollution and ultimately improve health and the environment in communities where we already have disproportionate burdens. And when implemented, will help all of us kind of see one another as neighbors through not only our regulatory processes, but the processes that we employ to protect air and human health, and to be good neighbors to one another. And I think that a couple other things just to highlight, the law applies in environmental justice areas with a 1 mile buffer in the 7-county metro area, in Rochester and Duluth. And the MPCA has maps showing the location of these environmental justice areas available, and where the facilities are that would be subject to this. And what I really want to stress is that we have started to host co-learning sessions with experts on the topics of cumulative health burdens and the impacts between pollution and health, as well as people around the country who are trying to navigate this in different spaces. And we've heard real positive feedback, because I think the value of this is recognizing that we need to have multiple and diverse perspectives seeing themselves in this work and building this together. And I'm encouraging you and others and your members to look at the website and participate in these, because the more people we have invested in the building of this cumulative tool, the better off it's going to be in the long run.
Thanks, Commissioner. And I think Conservation Minnesota members can expect to hear from us throughout the rulemaking process as well, just so we want to make them aware of when there's an opportunity to comment or engage with the agency. So keep an eye out for that. Commissioner Strommen, the Conservation Minnesota was really proud to partner with both your department and the Fond du Lac Band in securing funding to reintroduce elk in Northeast Minnesota. What should folks know about this project, and where does it stand currently? And do you think there'll need to be additional policy changes to help move the proposal along?
Well, this is a really exciting project. And I think, so often we're doing a lot of work to, hang on to some resource that we have in Minnesota. And this proposal really is about enhancing the state's elk population. It's really about a forward-looking long-term vision for elk management in Minnesota, and expanding the animals range in a way that provides not only ecological benefit, but also cultural benefit, recognizing the cultural significance of elk to both the Ojibwe and Dakota people, and recognizing that, historically it's part of their diet. And so there's a food sovereignty element to this as well. So where we are right now is we are working in partnership with the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. The plan is to move about 100 to 150 animals during the next 3 to 5 years. And so in order to be able to get to that point, there's kind of, there's the protocols around making sure we can test the animals that are slated to be moved for disease before they're relocated, understanding the habitat, the best locations within the Fond du Lac Reservation there in Carleton and southern St. Louis counties. And then we also know that stakeholder outreach to neighboring landowners, to county governments and others is going to be really important. I think the biggest challenge we've seen in managing the elk herd that we have in Northwest Minnesota is concerns over depredation. And so one of the policy changes we just got in this 2024 session was related to kind of artificial, what I'll call political population caps, as opposed to biological population caps. And so we have been capped, we have been restricted to managing the elk herd in the Northwest to a number that is tied to the number of depredation payments that occur by Department of Ag. We asked to have that language removed so we could decouple depredation payments from elk population. We weren't entirely successful in that, but we did get some language that allows us to grow the Kitson Central elk herd by 130% above our 2023 estimates. So, I think in terms of future policy changes, we'll see if that growth that's allowed to the Kitson Central herd is sufficient to basically maintain enough animals in the Northwest that we have a viable population, particularly given that not only is the state hunting, but Red Lake Nation recently has begun elk hunts in their ceded territory, and then also to have enough surplus animals for the relocation. And then we're also working with Department of Ag and other landowners on new tools or new resources to address those depredation concerns to make this project more socially acceptable. So stay tuned if we need more changes. We're feeling pretty good right now. And again, I think this is a really exciting project and a really exciting partnership.
Yeah, we're excited as well. Commissioner Arnold, one common refrain we hear from opponents to clean energy policy is about funding. They often ask about how they're going to pay for this. And I'm curious, how have the new clean energy policies in the state unlocked more federal funding opportunities through IIJA or IRA or whatever the alphabet soup is coming out of the federal government?
Yeah, there is an alphabet soup, and it is. I'm grateful for our team who is keeping track of all the different opportunities. So, one of the great things about the last biennium is that we really positioned ourselves to take maximum advantage of federal funds, not just within the Department of Commerce, but I think across all of the agencies, whether it's with the pollution reduction grants at PCA, to, Department of Transportation. We were really thoughtful to make sure that we are trying to draw down every dollar that we can from the federal government. We have a few ways that we do that are housed in the Department of Commerce. So the first is a state competitiveness fund, which is exactly what it is. We're just trying to be as competitive as possible within the state for federal funds. That was something that there was a broad array of stakeholders who were supportive of, and it was a bipartisan, ultimately a bipartisan effort to stand that up. We're expecting to be able to pull down, so there are projects all across Minnesota that are applying to reserve the funds to help match funds that they expect to get from the federal government. That we're currently in the reservations that we have tracked are expecting to draw down about $10 or 9.2, we'll round up for this purpose, federal dollars for every dollar we spend as a state. So it's a huge amount of leveraging that we're doing to pull down federal money by using, a little bit of state money to pull in all the federal money. We have two other funds that are designed to do sort of more loan and kind of financing tools. The competitiveness fund is much more grant focused. So it's there's technical assistance, and then it's sort of, you apply for a grant and you need to 10% of the money needs to come from some sort of match. We're there for that. We have two other buckets of money. Our Green Bank or MNCFA has about $45 million to start. They are starting to do projects. So you may have seen that the Heights development, I think is the wrong name, but in St. Paul, wanted to put in geothermal. They couldn't make the financing work out through traditional tools. The Green Bank stepped in to help make that financing work. That will ultimately spin off to be its own agency. We're sort of in the process of transitioning, of growing it and then sending it off to college in its own life, or whatever we call it. And while it's, under the department, it's going to be, continuing to do things like that. And really the goal there is to be a sort of creative financing mechanism that can plug holes. We have an additional amount of money that's, so total is about $190 million. That is part of what we are calling State Competitiveness Fund 2. We are very creative in naming at the Department of Commerce. And that is designed to help organizations go after loan money that's available through the Department of Energy, which is distinct from their grant money. So we're hoping or thinking that we can leverage about 40 to 1. So every state dollar we use, we can pull in about 40 federal dollars. So that's a lot to say that, in addition to that, we are pulling in grant money ourselves. So we are just under 700 million so far in money that we've been awarded or is in negotiations. So that includes almost $500 million for transmission lines. It's $62 million for solar for all, and then our homes in here, which is electrification and home energy efficiency improvements. We don't know the final award yet, but we'll be getting that money as well. So we're kind of all over the place. Like, if our goal was to have as many tools in the toolbox as possible to draw down as much federal money as possible, and I think we have that. And then now our aim as the department is to just use all of those tools as many times as we can.
That's great. I hope Mr. Wyckoff can keep it all straight, and I bet he can.
I am very fortunate to have a great team.
Right. I'm going to have to jump around a little bit because we have about 5 minutes left. Commissioner Kessler, we were really grateful for the agency's support of the Packaging Waste and Cost Reduction Act. And this is one of Conservation Minnesota's top legislative priorities. And we're excited to see how products and packaging are going to change and how the disposal of that packaging will change. And in 2032, all packaging will be reusable, recyclable, or compostable. And that seems like a long way away, but I think the agency's already started implementing this act. Do you mind telling us a little bit about how you're rolling that out and what you've heard from packaging producers and industry and others?
Yeah, we are also very excited about this. So glad to be able to highlight this. We are extremely pleased to see the action this year on reducing packaging waste, which accounts for a significant portion of the overall solid waste that is generated in the state. And The legislature historically has set very ambitious goals for the state. We have to be recycling by 2030, 35% of our solid waste in the outstate part of the state and 75% in the metro area. But those are the legislatively established goals, but we are not on track. And we are hopeful that the new Packaging Waste and Cost Reduction Act, or Extended Producer Responsibility Policy, which is the short name for it, which isn't that short, will help us get there. So Minnesota is one of a dozen states that have introduced this type of thing, and we became the 5th state this year to actually pass it. So as a part of this law, the agency is responsible for initially gathering data and developing a program through a needs assessment, and that'll have to repeat every 5 years. And another organization, or another thing that we will have to do, is establish what's called the Producer Responsibility Organization. So we're going to help make sure that this third party will be in place to help steer the goals in the law around waste reduction, reuse, recycling, composting of all the post-consumer materials that are in production, and they'll have to be helping us implement the outcomes of the needs assessment, thinking about what can be commingled and what needs an alternative recycling system. So the Producer Responsibility Organization will be responsible for implementing the program on the behalf of the producers. And then there's an advisory board, which we also have to help stand up to, that is responsible for reviewing all the materials, including the stewardship. They're called product stewardship plans and reports that will come out of the different streams of the producer responsibility. So the producer responsibility will represent different types of manufacturers, and they will have to develop stewardship plans that will be implemented, and there will be a third-party advisory board to make sure that those are followed through. So once the Producer Responsibility Organization stands up, we will largely kind of have an oversight role to make sure that the advisory board and the Producer Responsibility Group are following the plans and reporting. But just standing this up is a Herculean effort. And so I want to thank Conservation Minnesota, who played a very key role in negotiating a strong bill that because it is such a strong bill, it had a lot of advocates on all sides. And the final language, I will just be proud to raise up that this was supported by the Packaging Producers Organization, which is called Ameripen, and its members, including some of Minnesota's flagship companies like General Mills, as well as people who represent environmental advocacy groups, and of course, Conservation Minnesota. So there are still some who are concerned about this, but I am confident that this is another example of policy that will drive and stimulate economic opportunities by developing recycling markets and leading to new business opportunities. And we estimate that there's a value of recycled materials of over $100 million that the state could harness by implementing the new law.
We're excited too. And I could talk to you three all night, but I know we're up against time, so I want to be cognizant of that. And I had really hardball questions about the public waters inventory or feedlot permits or carbon pipeline reports, but we'll have to talk about those another time. But I'd be curious if either any one of you had some thoughts going into the 25-26 biennium, since it'll be the last biennium before our next gubernatorial election. Is there one thing that you're hoping to accomplish that you wouldn't mind sharing with us coming up in the next legislative session? And Commissioner Strommen, you're nodding your head like you might have something.
Yeah, I'll just say that we're really hoping to pick up on the momentum of our Get Out More initiative and continue to address funding issues. As folks know, the legislature did many wonderful things, but did not pass a bonding bill this last session. That's a huge detriment to the state of Minnesota. Certainly gets our agency further behind on deferred maintenance, on which we're already further behind. So we will be working on that. But I think more excitingly, we are really looking at a forward-looking vision for funding conservation and outdoor recreation in Minnesota. And so we are engaging with partners like Conservation Minnesota and Minnesotans to continue a conversation about what does a stable, long-term, equitable funding framework look like. And we are hoping that we may have some proposals to make next session. So let's make a pitch. There will be opportunities now and between and up to session, and hope Conservation Minnesota, your members and other Minnesotans will engage with us in that.
Thank you. Commissioner Kessler or Commissioner Arnold, do you have anything else to add?
You know, I think that making sure that we can implement all of the things that we have done so well thus far is going to be, you know, maybe not our top priority, but I do think it's something that is like not always the sexiest thing to talk about, but it's really important to make sure not only that we can get the value out of all the great policies we've passed, but also so that Minnesotans trust that when you make a change, that it will happen and it will happen well. And so I think you'll continue to see advocacy from the three of us and probably every one of our colleagues to make sure that we have, you know, policy resources and people resources and whatever is needed to be able to implement the, you know, everything that we have in front of us to the high standard that we all hold ourselves and our agencies and that Minnesotans expect from us.
And just really briefly, I will lift up what both Commissioner Strommen and Commissioner Arnold said around bonding and coordination and being effective in our cross spectrum coordination. And I think the one thing that I'll just highlight is we have great plans in place around climate change work on the mitigation and resilience side across the entire state and across different sectors, from residential to industrial to transportation to energy, to how we center this work around equity. And I'm really looking forward to being able to continue to work with others like Conservation Minnesota and diverse voices across the state to really accelerate that work, because it's very, very critical that we get it right at this moment.
I agree. Thank you, commissioners. And Catherine, I can hand it back to you for closing remarks.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. Thank you especially to Commissioners Arnold, Kessler, and Strommen for sharing your expertise with us. And finally, thank you to Nels for leading such an engaging discussion. I'd ask all of you joining us tonight to please stay engaged with Conservation Minnesota, and please stay tuned for more events like this coming soon.